Welcome to Coach Development Live on the Best Hour of Their Day podcast. If you're a new or developing coach who wants to coach with confidence, get better on the floor, and make a real impact, you're in the right place. Every episode, you'll hear from Level 4 coaches Todd and me, Kristin Bowen, as we break down practical coaching tips, real-world strategies, and answer your biggest coaching questions live. No fluff, just the help you need to sharpen your skills and become the best coach you can be. Let's get started.
Cabo, what's happening?
Morning. How are you?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Hey, Craig.
So what's that?
Saying hi to Craig.
Oh, Craig's already in the house. All right, we already
Yeah.
got it. Yeah, making it happen. Oh, good. We hit that at the same time. Perfect.
We're just in sync this morning. I like it.
That's it.
Jess is
25.3. How'd we do?
25.3.
Yeah.
I've blacked out. I don't even remember it. The open is over. I remember nothing. No,
There
I
was
liked
a
it.
rower, there were wall
Yeah.
walks,
I
and
like
there was
that
a lot
one.
of barbell.
It was about 8 minutes longer than I like my Metcons to be, but it was fun. I liked it. What'd you think?
Yeah, it was hard. It was good. I thought this year was really fun. I thought it was a good mix of workouts and movements and all the rest of that. I think they went pretty smoothly in the affiliate, which was nice. They were all challenging and just what you want from the open.
What was your favorite one?
I don't think I liked any of them, to be perfectly honest. Like, if you're asking me for a favorite, I don't like any of them. Now, the second one is the one that I, technically should be the best at. But
Okay.
they were hard. My overall conditioning this year was not the best I've had since I've been doing the open. But it was good.
Well, I mean, when you say since you've been doing the open, how many years have you done the open? What year is this for you?
In fact, I wanted to, somebody brought this up to me, and I wanted to send a email into the games and see if they could run the numbers on this. But I've done every open workout and submitted a score on the games page for every open workout since 2011, since it started.
Okay.
Have you done the same?
I have actually. I've done them all. There was one year, I can't remember which year it was. I forgot to submit for like the last workout. So officially I did it, and officially I don't think my score is in there. But that was my bad. I think I was traveling, and then I got home, and it just all of a sudden I was like, oh, I forgot to turn my score in. But I've done, even last year, I actually was injured. I pulled my back out, and it was that rowing jump rope. I think there was, deadlift. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to see what I can do. And even just sitting on the rower and trying to row, it was no good. But I just sat on the rower and just very lightly and easily rowed my 300. So my score for that one was the 300 meters. Like, that was my score. So even for that, I still was like, I'm at least going to get it in so I can still play. But every year since 2011. Crazy.
Yeah, crazy, right? Hard to believe it's been that long, but it's been fun.
So I guess I think my immediate reaction to you being like, I'm not my best conditioning since I've done the open. It's like, well, you've been doing it since 2011. So I think it's understandable that maybe you aren't at your peak fitness right this very second.
Well, and it's not even like I'm not at my peak fitness. It was just like every workout this year where it got really hard was when I had to take a knee because I couldn't breathe. It wasn't because I couldn't do another rep of the barbell. Like, every time I picked up the barbell or every time I jumped on the pull-up bar, I was able to do reps, but it was, hey, you can't breathe right now, so go ahead and take a knee, which is not usually the case. There's usually a point in the open where I'm like, I can't literally pick up the bar right now or something like that. That was not the case this year.
I didn't really think about it that way. And we were talking a little bit the other day on Tuesday, we had the Knowledge Pro call, and we were talking a bit about the programming and kind of the theme and everything. And we were talking a little bit about not exactly that, but just that the programming was such that most people you know, if you're kind of like that average RX, could do everything fine. There wasn't like a super heavy lift. There wasn't like a super crazy, you know, anything. I guess the most complex thing would be the bar muscle up. But yeah, other than that, so yeah, I feel the same. Nothing was beyond my capacity or ability. I just had to rest a lot.
Yeah, a lot for me.
I'm like, I don't like it when my heart rate is this high.
No, I don't like that. Jess, first year as a business owner, and my training went to the back burner. Yeah, let's get back after it for next year. I will tell you right now, and we used to joke about this a lot, but it still runs true. It's like, you want to get really unfit, go ahead and open a CrossFit gym. It's funny.
Even we talked about that with like getting on seminar staff, a bunch of us to talk about it. It's like, hey, what's the quickest way to decrease your fitness? Get on seminar staff and start traveling every single weekend. And it just, business ownership and a lot of travel. It takes a lot of work to maintain the same fitness level, for sure. When you have different priorities that start to come into play.
Especially,
Absolutely.
I remember it in 2008 and 9 and 10, like people would open gyms because they're like, I love CrossFit. I love to work out. I want to work out all the time. I'm going to open a gym. And then you open it and you're like, I don't have any time to work out. All I'm doing is coaching. I'm getting so unfit. I feel you with that, Jess. It will get better. It will get better. I promise. Your fitness. And what's funny about the open too, is like people, when I see people get bent out of shape, they're like, oh man, I finished in the 50th percentile or something like that. I'm like, 50th percentile on the open leaderboard is the top 1 percentile, like the 99th percentile of the worldwide human beings.
It's so true.
It's like, just walk into an airport and tell me, you know, how those people would do at the open.
An airport, an amusement park, a shopping mall, like all of the things where you're just going to see the general population. But, you know, I think it's good to remind ourselves of that every once in a while, because we do get caught up in our bubble. Like, we're in a bubble around other people that, you know, are prioritizing their health and fitness. And we can forget that. We were talking about that the other day in my gym at our class. We were finishing doing some strict pull-ups, like just some sets of strict pull-ups. And some of the girls were like, I can only get 3. And we're like, the fact that you can even do 1 strict pull-up at like 42 years old or whatever, like that you're ahead of, there's some statistic our coach was giving us, like just being able to even just do 1 strict pull-up as a female, you're in like the top 3% of the population or some crazy stuff like that. So
yeah.
Oh, Amanda.
This is
70.3 Ironman. And become a gym owner. Yeah, this open season was brutal. No kidding. Yeah. Good for you for doing it.
Heck yeah. So awesome. That's so cool.
That's amazing.
So with 3, like, as fun as the open is, the most challenging part for me as a gym owner in this year, and they continue to make it better and better every year, which is logistically with the workouts and the movements and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, it's like, we run our classes, we run at least 2 heats. Well, it's always 2 heats a class because you need people to be judged. And we've got to figure out how to coach. And especially when there's workouts, really every single workout that we did this year had complex movements. We had double unders and dumbbell snatches, dumbbell hang clean and jerks. First week, we had thrusters, pull-ups, chest to bar, and bar muscle ups. And then the last week, wall walks, deadlifts, cleans, and snatches. With that, we've got to be able to teach these movements. And so when it comes to teaching, and we talked about this last week, there's 2 different ways to approach teaching. One way is layering, which is what we talked about last week. And this week we want to talk about progressions. And I'd be curious to know if anybody that's listening and following along could tell us the difference between layering, a teaching style where we layer in points of performance, or we use progressions to teach points of performance. What do we got? What is the difference between those 2? And then I want to talk a little bit more about specifically progressions, how we can apply them, or how we maybe did apply them with these open workouts, and where some of the pain points are, what are the values in using progressions and that kind of stuff. So I'd love to see a comment. Anybody got the idea of what's the difference between progressions and layering in points of performance? gonna hang for a minute, and then I'm gonna ask Cable. I'm curious to know if you know the difference, Kristin.
I think I do know the difference, but
all right, good.
Everybody explains it a little bit differently, so I am curious to see what people say here. Oh, this is for the 25.3.
Oh, second attempt. Oh, that's so awesome. We had only a handful of people repeat the workout, the 25.3, and everybody did better. And it was funny.
Really?
There was a couple of them that one guy that smashed his first attempt looked so miserable the entire time. I've never seen somebody crush a workout and look so dead from like the deadlifts on. The other one, we had a girl that redid it, and like after her first set of deadlifts, she was like, "This is stupid. I'm not going to do it." And I'm like, "Hey, it's just a workout. Just keep going. Who cares? It doesn't matter." And of course, she, wanted to quit, but she kept going, and she beat her previous score by like 10 calories or something like that.
That's
she
amazing.
Crushed it.
And I'm also just laughing at the whole, like, this is stupid. I don't want to do this. And it's like the amount of times that is gone, that is in my head, that I have to try so hard not to say that out loud in front of my, people that I coach.
Yeah. It's
so
just a workout.
Yeah, it's just a workout at the end of the day. Yes, absolutely. So we got a couple.
Yeah, we got some responses here. Yeah, Marlena, I would say progressions is a step-by-step process, and layering is focusing on one point of performance at a time. Yep, I love the idea and the concept that the progression is step-by-step. We also have James that said layering, you start with the foundation, like the setup, but also give them one thing to focus on and adding as you go. And you're absolutely right, James. We always want to start with setup. And there's 3 components that go into the setup. Kristin, what are those 3 components that we want to teach for the setup always?
Yep. For the setup, we always want to look at stance, the grip, and then body position.
Sweet. Stance, grip, body position. And body position. And so this is whether we're layering or we're using a progression. Let's see. So the point of performance remain the same, layering adds. And so here's where we want to take this, Amanda, and add to this. When it comes to layering in points of performance, Kristin, what is the big thing there? We're focusing on one point of performance at a time, just like everybody said so far. But what is the athlete doing? Not only are they focusing on one point of performance, but they're doing what?
Yeah, when we're layering in with one point of performance at a time, we still want our athlete to do the full movement. So the movement in its entirety. So to James's point, we're going to start with the setup, always stance, grip, body position. And then first point of performance, here's what I want you guys to think about doing. And then they do the full movement and we watch for that point of performance. And then the layering happens when now I'm going to give another point of performance, and they're going to do the full movement while I'm looking for that point of performance. All the while, every time they're doing a rep, the full movement is happening. So we're thinking about things like a squat, a front squat, a deadlift, a press, things that are a little bit more simple in nature.
Yeah, I think somebody described it on my Coach Dev call yesterday as movements that are simple enough for people to do the full movement, but just have one thing to focus on. And so to your point there, when we're layering in points of performance, if we're doing that with the squat, and we watched Pete do a great job of this last week, it's like, all right, first thing we're going to work on are the hips going back and down. And so that's the focal point. That's the thing that we teach. Then we're calling reps. Athletes are doing the full air squat. And our focus as a coach is the hips going back and down. Their focus, what they're concentrating on, is the hips going back and down. Once we've done that, we move to the next thing. And that can be knees tracking the toes, or that can be heels, but it's just one thing at a time. But like you said, they're doing the full movement. Now, when it comes to using a progression, what do we mean by that? What are we doing when we're using a progression to teach a movement?
So progression is when we're breaking the movement down into little pieces, where typically we're doing this with a more complex movement. And we're essentially taking small little snapshots of the movement and only focusing on that piece of the movement, which therefore allows us to just focus on a specific point of performance. An example, like a pretty basic example, would be like a push press. The first step of a progression would be a dip and hold. So we still are going to do that dip, drive, and then press for the full movement, but we're taking just the dip part and we're isolating it so that we can focus on what the torso position looks like during the dip. It just simplifies these more complex, more dynamic movements a bit.
And that helps out both the athlete and the coach. The athlete only has to think about one part of the movement at a time. If we're just going to dip and hold, and the importance there is keeping our torso upright, that's the main point of performance. They can focus on that. And then for us as a coach, that can help us direct our eye to only look at that one thing. And then we take those small pieces and parts and they build upon each other, eventually getting to the full movement. Here's a trick question for you, or a tough question. A
trick question or a tough question?
It's both.
Either. Okay.
Either. Well, yes. The answer is yes.
Let's see how this goes.
Which is better, layering in or using progressions?
It depends. There is no answer. How's that?
Yeah. Oh, trick question. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah. Is that the answer that you're looking for? I would say I would seriously say it just depends. Like it depends on what the movement is. It depends on maybe the ability level and the experience level of your athletes. It just depends how much time you have.
All of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. There's not one that's right, one that's wrong necessarily. It all depends on the situation at hand. But knowing the difference is going to help you come up with a strategy and decide when to do it. Serena, you're absolutely right. A progression for the kipping pull-ups, like a beat swing, a kip swing, which is a bigger kip, half pulls, and then kipping pull-ups. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. That would be a great way to teach the kipping pull-up, where there's smaller pieces and parts that eventually build to the full movement.
Because even with this progression of the kipping pull-ups, and this is, this is kind of the idea of if you don't really know what a specific progression is for a particular movement, and you have to kind of come up with one on your own, you're just breaking the movement down. But for every step of that, just making sure that you have a specific thing that you're focusing on and that you're looking for. So every step of a progression should have some sort of a purpose or some sort of a point that ties to a point of performance. A lot of P's there, a little alliteration.
Jens adds another one: kip swing plus a kip, kipping or jumping pull up. Yep, that's another one. And that's the cool thing about movement in general, is that you can use different progressions. There's not one way or one right way to teach a pull up, or there's not only one way to teach any movement, really. It's going to depend on who you are as a coach. It's going to depend on the athletes in front of you. But with that being said, if we are going to use a progression, there should be the progression steps should have a point of performance baked into them. So there's a why behind it, and you should know what that why is and actually try to achieve it. It shouldn't be like, well, I saw a video of somebody teaching the pull up this way, and so this is what I'm going to do. A lot of us start there, but hopefully eventually we get to the point where we start with the kip swings to make sure that body position is correct and that the swing is initiated with the shoulders and not the legs. And then we do the kip swing into the kip to make sure that the timing is correct. And we've got that quarter extremity. It's like legs and then arms with the big press down. And then we move to the pull up. All right, let's see. Still not clear on the difference. Layering is the full movement with one focus, while the progression is a simple to complex, maybe more than one focus. You want to take this? You want me to jump in?
Yeah, you go ahead. Because I explained, like in my mind, I explained what a progression is to me, like the way that I explain it. So why don't you explain it and see if that helps Amanda a little bit, and then I can add on to it if we need to.
Yeah.
This is this is really common, Amanda, like very, very common, to clarify the two.
Yep. So layering is the full movement. So like we said, if we're doing an air squat, if we're teaching the air squat for the day, we're going to teach the setup position. That happens for every movement every single time. So the stance, grip, and body position. But then as soon as we want to start teaching the points of performance, and the air squat has 5 of them, there's a neutral spine, weight in the heels, hips go back and down. We move through a full range of motion and the knees track the toes. We're going to start with one of those points of performance at a time, which is, let's say we start with hips back and down. I'm going to teach that to my group, my athletes. telling them that I want the hips back and down. I'm going to show what that looks like. I'm going to tell them how to do that. Maybe telling them to imagine there's a little chair behind them that they're sitting down to. And when I say go, they're going to perform a full air squat. They're going to do the full movement. We're going to continue that process as I move to the next point of performance. Maybe it's knees out. I'm going to teach them knees out. I'm going to tell them to squat. They're going to squat all the way down. They're going to do the full air squat. A progression would be, and I can use the same example of an air squat. A progression would be where if I start by teaching hips back and down, instead of having the athlete do the entire squat where they squat all the way down, I begin with like, hey, athletes, we're going to begin teaching you how to send your hips back. And all I want you to do is just push your butt back and sink down about a quarter of the way. And then they stand back up. And then we do that a couple times. And then we get a little bit lower. Maybe we do like a half squat and then a full squat. Do you see what I'm saying there? It's like the layering, they do the full movement. The progression, we do a segment of the movement that eventually builds to the full movement.
All right, follow-up question for you, Todd.
Yep.
As a coach, what is the importance of knowing the difference between layering and a progression?
The importance in knowing the difference between layering and progressions. One, it allows you to create a strategy and a game plan on how you want to teach the movements and what you're going to do on that specific day. But I'll be perfectly honest with you. If you didn't understand the difference between layering and progressions, but you did know how to teach using the tell, show, do, check process and emphasizing and having a focus of one point of performance at a time that eventually taught all of the points of performance and got to the full movement, I would be perfectly happy and fine with that and not concerned that you didn't know the difference between layering and progressions. What would you say to that?
I completely agree. I think I don't want us to get so wrapped up in the semantics and forget the bigger picture, which is that we are using these as essentially systems and strategies in order to teach the points of performance in the most effective way that we can. And at the end of the day, if we know the points of performance for the movement and we give them all to our athletes at once, and we are just like, okay, now you do it, it's not going to be very successful. So we need to have these strategies to be able to deliver things one at a time in digestible pieces so that our athletes have one thing to focus on and we as coaches have one thing to focus on, and then we can just continue to build from there. Sometimes it makes a lot more sense to have our athlete do the full movement and we give them one thing to focus on at a time with the full movement. Sometimes, specifically with more complex movements, it makes a lot more sense to break it down into more simple components so that, again, we then start to build. Okay, you're going to deadlift. Great. Now you're going to deadlift and then you're going to shrug. Awesome. Now you're going to do the same thing, only you're going to go faster. And then we can continue to add on to that. And it just allows our athletes to again, digest what's going on a little bit simpler. So these two things, layering, progressions, they're literally just systems to help us get to that end goal, which is coaching in the most effective way we can.
All right. I'm going to come back to this comment. I pulled this up by Sarah, but okay. James just dropped something that is awesome. And this was actually a question I want to ask you. So the value in teaching, whether it's layering or progressions, is twofold. For the athletes, it gives them one thing to think about and concentrate on and focus on, which makes their job much easier. And then for us as a coach, it's reinforcing, just like James says here, it also helps the coach in what they're looking for in both cases. Help me see more than one athlete at a time. And so what I always remind myself is that when I am teaching, whether it's a progression or layering in a point of performance, when I tell the athlete, hey guys, what you're focusing on is your hips going back and down, that's verbally reminding myself that my eyes should only primarily be looking at the hips going back and down. It's like, hey, don't go chasing those butterflies that are going to go flying by. Look at the hips, look at the hips, look at the hips. And that's where my eyes are going to be directed, which allows, just like James said, for us to see way more subtle things. It's like there's going to be gross or obvious faults that's going to be easy for us to see. The better we get as teachers, those obvious faults are going to start to disappear a little bit. And so it's going to be harder to see because the faults will be more subtle. And so we're only going to actually see them as if we're very deliberate and disciplined in what we're looking for. And James makes such a good point of this right here. All right. You have anything to add to that? Looked like you were going to say something. No? Good?
No, I'm just kind of laughing at what you said, where it's like, it's just the irony of it all, right? The better we get at teaching, the harder it ends up being to see, because we're teaching our athletes better, they're moving better, and therefore their faults are more subtle. So now it's harder for us to find the faults. So it's just this weird, like, it's, I mean, it's good. It's all the process, but it just kind of makes me laugh a little bit when you think about it.
Yeah. So Sarah, you asked a good question. Should you limit the time layering so the athletes don't get too tired, or does that matter? Just keep it to a couple reps at a time. So more often than not, I would not concern myself with the volume of reps. I'd concern myself with the time I have allotted to teach whatever movement that I'm going to teach, and know that the more reps that athletes do, number one, the more they get to practice whatever it is that they're working on. Number two, the more that they get a warm up. Number three, the more that I get to see and correct. And so more often than not, I'm not worried about people getting tired. It's like they come to CrossFit class to work out and to work hard. And the more reps they do, the more they're going to get out of that. Now, there is a caveat there that if I've got a brand new athlete and they have not worked out in a significant amount of time, they are new to CrossFit, they're doing something like squats, in that scenario, I am absolutely going to limit the reps, because I want them to be able to get out of bed tomorrow and walk up and down their stairs if they have them at their house. And so with new athletes, yes, limit it. With normal athletes that come to the gym 3 to 5 days a week, they like warm-up reps should not make them too tired for anything going forward. And the more reps that we give them, the more we're going to be able to see what's going on and ideally correct those things. You got anything to add to that?
I was just going to have you add in how you manage that in a class where you have a new person in the class with a bunch of experienced athletes and you're calling their warm-up reps. How do you manage that?
If I've got somebody that's brand new and this is like their first class, and say we don't have like an intro series that kind of slowly but surely intro them into the program, I'm going to tell them to take like every rep off or something like that. Did I say that? Every other rep?
Every other rep. Yeah.
Yeah. Every other rep. So it's like, all right, Kristin, you're going to do this one with me. Now take a break here. I'm going to call a rep, or, you know, I'll do something like that to be very deliberate in managing their reps. Yeah.
I love it.
All right, let me see. Omar's got a great question, and Jens helped him out, but this is one that I want to bring up because you've got something specifically that I think we can talk about, but I want to see what else we've got here. We've got, you know, James making a point, no empty reps. Yep. Whenever we call a rep, we want to be looking for something, and we want to either acknowledge that it happened or cue and correct our athletes so they do it better if they didn't do it correctly. Let's see. Amanda, how do you choose which movements to break down if you have a workout like 25.3 and only 1 hour? Oh, great question. And this was the hardest part of the open for us, is like, you've got 4 movements that you like, 5 movements that you need to teach. And so the lucky thing is that all things considered is like the deadlift kind of applies to the clean. So it's like I teach the clean with a deadlift, probably a deadlift shrug, and then a power clean. Then we change the grip and do the snatch. And so ideally, Amanda, I'm going to tell you that we want to teach all of the movements. This is going to be one where I'm just not going to give as many reps. And this is also one where the general warm-up is going to be like, all right, guys, I want you to get on the rower for 1 minute and row and see how many calories you can get. Then we're going to get off the rower. We're going to get right on the ground in front of the wall. We're going to do some wall walks, cover the standards there. Make sure you know how to do those correctly. And then we're going to grab barbells, and I'm going to take you through this stuff pretty darn quick. You have any other thoughts? How did you get a chance to coach any of the open workouts?
No, I didn't. However, I just wanted to add to that. I agree with that. I would absolutely pull the row, the wall walk into the general warm up. And the biggest thing is when you have multiple movements that you have to coach like that, if you if you can just take a big picture during your lesson planning and look and see what things connect to each other. Like Todd said, the big thing for 25.3 is that the deadlift is the first thing that you're going to do before the clean. So right away, you can teach both of those together. And then the clean and the snatch, we see the same kind of components there. We just have to change the grip, the finish position. So when you're looking at your workout, just look and see how things overlap with each other, how you can maybe make combinations, and then what makes sense to be like, hey, I'm just going to cover this really quickly in the general warm up and just focus on the things that that people need to warm up a little bit more and could benefit from having a little bit more coaching.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. All right. So here's the question from Omar. How many steps minimum for a progression? What's your answer to that? And do you have your
yeah, let me see if I can.
If you can pull this up. So like answer that in general and then give us an example of what you've got.
Okay. I'm trying to share my screen. Did I share it?
Yep. And now I can add it to the stage.
Okay. Add it to
give the answer first, and then I'll add.
Yeah, I was queuing it up. It up. Enough to, yes. Okay. So question is, pull that question back up. So the question is, how many minimum steps in a progression?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd say there really isn't a yes or no answer here, but you want to be able to cover whatever points of performance that you are choosing to cover that day, right? And so 3 probably, you could, I guess you could technically do a progression with 2 steps, but think about what the points of performance are that you're trying to teach and you're trying to cover. And then you can look at your progression steps and be like, okay, do I have time to do a 6-step progression where I'm going to focus on one point of performance with each step and really kind of take my time to do this? Or like Amanda's question, we've got something like 25.3 or, 2-part workout or whatever. And I don't have a lot of time. Maybe I've got like 5 minutes in my lesson plan to be able to cover this movement, but I still want to be able to cover the same points of performance. Then we might shorten how many steps we have in the progression, but thoughtfully combine some of the points of performance where it makes sense to potentially cover more than one. But I say thoughtfully there and have it make sense because the more things we combine, the more complicated and complex it's going to be. And we run the risk of eliminating even the purpose of using the progression, right? If we try to do too much at once. So why don't we share? Do you have something to add there?
Yeah, just the more stuff we try to add, the more it potentially becomes confusing for the athlete, and the less disciplined we're going to be on what we're looking for, and so the more challenging it's going to be for us to see anything. All right, so here's what we want to show, and you can talk through this, and this I think also will also answer this question on, is there a maximum number of steps per progression as well?
Yeah. And I just want to point out too, we talked earlier about there not being like very many absolutes and right way, wrong way. So these are 2 examples. I just want to note, it says example, hang power clean. 2 examples of how you can do this. This is by no means like hard and fast, like you have to teach the hang power clean with this progression or else you're not doing it right. But as we go through and we look at progression number 1, 6-step progression. Okay, so each step, that's what we're doing. So step number 1, we're going to go dip, drive, high elbows. And the asterisk there tells me as the coach the point of performance that I'm looking for. Okay, so the dip, drive, high elbows, I'm looking for that bar path, right? Keep the elbows high so the bar stays close. Then we're going to do a tall muscle clean. Fast elbows is what I'm looking for. And you guys can read through it. But for those of you that might just be listening, we've got a high hang power clean. We're working on the receiving position, a high hang power clean from mid thigh. So now we're starting to hinge over, close the hip a little bit. So now I'm looking for hip extension. And keeping in mind, this is where now I'm on step number 4. I'm still looking for bar path, fast elbows, the receiving position. But every time I add on a new step, that's the new thing that I'm really having my athletes focus on, right? All right, you guys, now we're going to take that barbell down to the mid thigh by pushing our hips back. And then we're really going to focus on squeezing your butt before you do your pull. Watch me. And then you do it. And then now you have your athletes do it, really focusing on squeezing the butt for the hip extension. Then we've got hang power cleans. So now we're working on catching lower each rep, hip extension and the landing, and then we can go into cycling, positioning on the reset between reps. Some people would consider the last step, cycling, not really part of the teaching progression, but if we're going to be cycling the barbell in the workout, which most of the time we are, then that's something that you want to consider adding in there for your people. Okay, so that's 6 steps. That's a lot of opportunity to teach each thing, give them a few reps at each component. Now, option number 2, 3 steps. We've got high hang power clean from the mid thigh, and the hang power clean with cycling. And so with the high hang power clean, we're looking for elbows and bar path. So option number 1, we had 2 different things: dip drive with the high elbows, that was the bar path, and a tall muscle clean, that was fast elbows. Well, now we're just combining that into a high hang power clean. So I'm looking for elbows and a bar path. Okay. And then we have power clean from the mid thigh, and then hang power clean cycling, like I said. And then you're just adding hip extension and receiving position, and then hip extension and positioning on the reset. Again, one way you can teach it, I don't typically go to this when I teach the power clean. This isn't my go-to progression, but I just wanted to give an example of how you can take 6 steps and teach these points of performance. And then if you have literally 5 minutes and you've got to teach something quickly, you're still looking for the same points of performance. You're just doing it with far less steps.
Yeah, I love that. And I look at that and, like, to your point, so much of it needs context of what's going on in the class, how much time do we have, and all the rest of that. But I look at this and I'm like, man, the first one, the 6-step progression is probably going to be a day where maybe it's a heavy day.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want my athletes to be technical. There's going to be rest in between sets. Maybe it's like 7 sets of 3 reps for the hang power clean. And so we've got a little bit more time to actually spend and diving into the nuances and really trying to prime the system there and get ready to rock and roll. Whereas the second one would be something if instead of in 25.3, we had regular power cleans, if it was hang power cleans in that workout for that day where we had, limited time and had to get 2 heats done in an hour of a 20-minute workout, well, then I'm going to use progression number 2 to get through this thing quick. It's still going to cover everything that I need to cover. I'm still going to be teaching the points of performance. I'm still going to be looking for those things, but this thing's going to be a lot quicker, more streamlined. It also is going to be at a loading that is going to be lighter than it probably is on a heavy day. And so it can be less technical. Like, all of those things add to the context of which one to use. And so, Omar, to your question, how few can you use? It really depends on the movement, but probably in that range of 3 is probably a good low end. It's hard to go 2 steps for a progression, but I've actually seen it done. And then how many is too many, or what would be the max that Vicente asked about? Probably 6, maybe 8, depending on what the movement is there. Because at some point, if it turns into 10 or 12 steps, it might get a little bit too watered down and be too simplified, and we might spend so much time bogged down on teaching the small pieces that we don't really get to the full movement and spend enough time there. So that's my input on that. Let's see. There's a couple things going on here. I like the fact.
Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Did I?
So, you're fine. I think everybody got the progression. All right.
Yeah.
So Serena asked the questions or made the statement. It feels like it also depends on how the athletes learn. People learn in different ways. People learn visually. They learn by doing, or also like audio by hearing. Jens answers that and makes a point. The way athletes learn should affect your cueing, but not your progressions, as the point of performance taught stay the same. Just make sure each athlete gets your attention during this specific warm-up. And so Jens, you're absolutely right. Like, our progressions or the way that we layer in the points of performance should not matter based on somebody's learning style, but the way that we actually teach using a layering system or a progression is with this teaching and coaching process. And it's a 4-step process. Kristin, what is that 4-step process?
We're going to tell our athletes what we want them to do. We're going to show them, and then we're going to have them do it. So we're going to tell them how to do it. And then that's going to give them the opportunity to implement it, and then check. So that's our chance to look and see. And then that's when we do our seeing and correcting. So tell, show, do, check.
And by using that process to implement, to communicate, and teach the system, the layering system or the progression system that we use, by doing the process of tell, show, do, check, when we tell our athletes, the people that learn by hearing, they're going to understand it there. When we show without talking, we're going to allow the athletes that learn visually to learn by doing that. And then the athletes that learn best by doing, that are kinesthetic, they're going to get a chance to learn when they're practicing actually doing the reps. And so, Serena, you are absolutely right. It depends on how our athletes learn, and everybody learns in different ways. And so if we take the system, either layering or using a progression, but we deliver it with the process of tell, show, do, check, we're going to be touching all of those different areas, and we're going to be checking the boxes for anybody's different learning style, which will be super impactful there.
Which is great, because that way you can roll into your class with your plan. Like, you can create your teaching plan of how you're going to do your progressions and what point of performance each progression step is going to relate to. And you can roll with that plan regardless of who's in your class. And then by doing that tell, show, do, check, that's going to cover all those bases. And like Jens said, then you can start to athlete dependent make those cues based on what you see in front of you. But your teaching plan can remain the same regardless, which is great, because that sets us up for success for sure.
Now, Amanda asked a question. I think I might need a little bit more context here, Amanda. How do y'all feel about a member that moves well doing the movement while we teach instead of teaching and moving? The way I first interpreted this, and tell me if I'm wrong, is like, Kristin, have you ever seen those athletes that you go to teach a movement and you demo it and then they start doing it and it looks good? And so you're like, all right, she must have this thing down. And then you get into the workout and you add load or you add speed or you add reps, essentially intensity, and all of a sudden they don't look so good?
No, that has never, ever happened.
That's never happened to you?
Everyone I teach moves perfectly through. Yes.
That's the way it works.
No, that happens all the time. I think rowing is such a good example of that. Is we take people, I mean, we can do a progression for rowing, right? Like, take the people through a progression and teach people to row, and everybody looks really great with their timing and their positioning, and the workout starts, and all of a sudden that all goes out the window and nobody looks a thing like what was just happening during the warm-up. So yeah, that is absolutely something that can happen.
Yeah. And whenever I see that, like, I've had that happen before. And so what I always try to reiterate to coaches is that, and this especially happens with like newer athletes, and when I'd be doing like a one-on-one intro or something like that, and I'd go to teach the squat, I'd demo the full squat, I'd start the process of layering in points of performance, and I'd teach like 1 or 2 points of performance, and they would be doing everything so well. Like, I'd teach hips back and chest up, and they just, because they were so good at watching and mirroring what I was doing, they'd be getting to full depth, their knees would be out and their heels would be down. In my mind, I'd be like, oh, Kristin already knows how to do this. I don't necessarily need to cover knees out, full depth, and heels down. She's already got that. And then we go out onto the gym floor, and 3, 2, 1, go happens, and the workout happens, and everything else goes wrong. And what I realized is that sometimes athletes can do it correctly by accident, meaning they're so good at just watching you and mimicking that in that one-on-one, like, contrived environment, that when the workout happens, if they don't realize some of those other points of performance that are important parts of the movement, and we don't reiterate those things, they don't realize that they are important. And so in that scenario,
and then they just revert back to doing it how they would should you not have even coached them.
Exactly. And so in that scenario, my recommendation is always for a coach to completely teach all the points of performance, even if the athletes are already doing them well, and just reinforcing and being like, Kristin, so the next thing we're going to work on are knees tracking over the toes. Now, you already do a good job of this, but here, I want you to watch. My knees are going out. You're doing great with that, so keep that up. Hey, the other thing I want you to think about is that we need to get our hip crease below our knee. You are moving through a fantastic range of motion. Make sure that you keep that up, that kind of stuff. So Amanda, I don't know if, let me see, did she add some context to us? Instead of coach, tell, show, do, having someone else or even a video do the doing. I would think that I think what you mean there is the showing, using a different person to do the demonstration for you as a coach.
Yes,
because
that is it.
The doing should be the athletes. Yeah. If that's perfectly fine. If by chance, let's say we've got muscle ups in the workout and I can't do a muscle up and I'm going to teach the muscle up, I can use Kristin as my demonstrator. Hey guys, we're going to go over the muscle up. Watch Kristin. She's going to do a rep, but we still want to follow the same process where I tell them what they're going to do. We allow whoever's doing the showing, doing the demonstration to demonstrate it without talking. And then we're going to take our athletes through how to do it, have them do it, and then check to make sure they're doing it correctly. Anything to add to that?
No.
No
notes.
Yep.
No
notes. James, you got it. Yep. Still cover the points of performance in the warm-up and practice reps 100%. You should definitely do that. Let's see. Vicente asks, how do you guys handle an experienced member that is used to doing a movement a certain way, and when you give them feedback, they just say, it doesn't work for me. I'm used to doing it this way. Ooh. My favorite athletes. I'll tell you that right now. They just make me so excited. Kristin, how do you deal with those folks? The ones that are like, nah, I'm good. Thanks.
First thing I usually do is just talk to them from a place of like, hey, I'm just curious, like ask them some questions, right? Like, so you give them feedback and say, it doesn't work for me. I'm just used to doing it this way. It also depends on what the movement is and what I'm trying to fix. But oftentimes I'll just talk to them and ask them like, hey, is it more comfortable for you to do it that way? Does it hurt when you widen your feet a little bit, or, just have some conversation with them. I'll tell you though, if it's something that's unsafe and they're completely violating what needs to happen with the movement, it's fairly non-negotiable. And I'll tell them why.
Not fairly non-negotiable. It might.
Should I take my soft speak out?
Yeah. Joel wouldn't allow that.
Like if it's unsafe, it's fairly non-negotiable in general, regardless. But if it's unsafe, it is non-negotiable. How's that?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like Kristin said, you need to get to know what's going on with that athlete. And a lot of times I'll just be like, hey, I know you like to squat and narrow, Kristin, but humor me for a minute. I want you to go a little bit wider and just feel what your torso does or whatever that is. And it's like, it's one of those deals where it's like that whittle away at them over time to make those small adjustments, just go a little bit wider with your feet. And then next week, a little bit more wider and all of that kind of stuff. But like you said, if it's somebody that moves like trash and it has the potential to get injured, you either listen to what I say or you find a new gym, unfortunately. And I know a lot of coaches out there don't have the freedom to do that like I do as the gym owner. But I also make it very clear to my coaches that they are the ones in control. And if by chance they ever have that situation, I've got their back. So, but more often than not, a lot of people are so concerned with their score that when you're like, hey, I want you to squat with your feet a little bit wider, it's going to be uncomfortable and awkward and feel different for the first workout or two. And if it's a heavy day, they probably won't lift quite as much weight because they're not used to it, or maybe they won't go quite as fast. And it's really hard for some people being willing to take one step backwards when it comes to workout performance and scores. But if you can really convince them that by taking one step backwards today, it's going to allow them to take 2 or 3 steps forward in the future, you've got a better shot of being able to make that adjustment. So I know that's not a black and white answer for you, but hopefully that helps a little bit.
No, but it's another good example. Like oftentimes we talk about when you're teaching, keep it simple, say less, just deliver like whatever the minimum thing is that you need to say to get your people to move well. But there's also an importance of knowing more, right? Like knowing why it's important to do each point of performance or to be in a certain position or to use your hips before you pull with your arms. Like all of that knowledge is really important for us to have. And I always tell coaches, like you should have that. Keep in your back pocket. You don't need to tell all of your athletes all of the whys and all of the reasons, but this is a great example of why it's important to have that in your back pocket so that when you are having a conversation with someone that's like, well, this is just how I do it and this is the way I want to do it, you're armed with the knowledge to communicate to them why you're trying to ask them to do it in a different way. And ultimately, it's to help them. It's to help them move better, safer, more efficiently. Like that's the ultimate goal there. And so sometimes it just takes a little bit more of a conversation than just like, do it because I said, which I will do though.
Amanda, yes, absolutely. If you've got another coach in class or a really good mover, use them as a demo. The only caveat that I'm going to tell you is that more often than not, you probably need to get with that person before class and give them a heads up. Hey, Kristin, I'd like to use you as my demo for the muscle up in class today. Are you cool with that? Number one, that allows them to communicate to you, that they're good and they're able to do so. And then it also allows you to set the stage of being like, all right, cool. Here's what I want you to show. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Once you do it on the high rings, we're going to go to low rings, whatever that is. So it just allows you to have just a smooth transition into that demonstration and allow for a good experience. Now, I have done it before where it's like, and Kristin's going to show us 5 reps of the wall ball shot today and put her on the spot and had her do it just to like highlight them. And usually people will cheer or something like that. And it's kind of like a sarcastic, like, oh, look at her. She's so amazing. Like, I think some of those are great, but if you're really going to use them as the demo and really want to emphasize some things, just spend some time beforehand to make sure that you guys are both on the same page and you get from your demonstrator exactly what you want. Tim, exactly. I sometimes will just tell them why and might finish with telling them to trust me. And more often than not, they improve and I get more buy-in. Heck yeah. Yeah, you can add the why to this stuff. Hey, I want your feet wider. Why is that? I usually squat narrow. It's because your torso is way more upright. That's going to make you more efficient when you're doing your thrusters, and it's going to be way less taxing on you. Watch this. You'll be able to do 21 in a row instead of 15. Then they do 15 and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. This is the greatest thing ever. Permission first. Yes, 100%, Amanda. All right. So we've got a couple minutes left, and there was something else with progressions that I wanted to discuss. Any of our complex movements, we can use progressions, but oftentimes we see a slight difference between how we can use our progressions in barbell movements and gymnastics movements.
Yep.
Barbell movements typically, like, it just builds to the full movement, and everybody more often than not outside of an injury can usually do the full barbell movement, right? And so it's like, hey, even if somebody's brand new, I can give them a PVC pipe and they can go through the snatch progression at the same time that another athlete's using a 45 pounds and still go through those steps and build to the full movement. With gymnastics movements, that's not always the case. And so if we are using a progression through a gymnastics movements, number one, how do I approach it if somebody can't do, say we're doing toes to bar and an athlete can't do toes to bar? And what's the other advantage of using progressions in a gymnastics movement where not everybody's going to be able to do that movement completely? What do you think about that, Kristin?
Oh yeah. So when I think of progressions for gymnastics movements, it's still building up to complexity, building up to get to the full movement, but almost every step in the progression could essentially be used as the scaling option for that day for our people, right? So If we're doing a toes to bar, like you said, as the example, maybe we're hanging from the bar and doing some kip swings. Maybe then we're doing some kip swings and just a knees up, right? Just to kind of think about pressing down on the bar and raising your knees up a little bit. Well, that may be as far as a lot of people get for that day. And it's like, all right, we call this the bus stop method. Sometimes people have heard that, right? It's like, hey, we're on our journey, we're on the bus. And every time we're layering on a little bit more for toes to bar, maybe more range of motion for the legs or the toes, that's another stop on the bus. And you can choose to get off at that stop, and that's where you're going to stay. If you stay on the bus, we're going to go one step further and we'll start to get to that full movement.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Is like, that's a cool thing about gymnastics movements and gymnastics progressions is oftentimes our scaling options get baked into that. And like you said, it's like, hey, if I don't have an athlete that can get their toes all the way to the bar, no problem. We can do the swings and the knee raises for the workout that day. And they continue to get to work on the kip swings themselves to start pulling those knees up or those legs up. And that's going to be a plenty good of a challenge for them. And it's going to eventually build them to the full movement. Now, we had a discussion about this, I think, yesterday, where it's a little bit different than the progressions we use for like a barbell, where in a sumo deadlift high pull, one of the steps of the progression is to deadlift and shrug. Very rarely do we use that as a scaling option to where it's like, it's not necessarily a bus stop method there where it's like, oh, if you can't sumo deadlift high pull, we're just going to deadlift shrug today. It's like, I guess we could probably come up with a one-off scenario where that would be appropriate. But more often than not, with a barbell movement, because of the fact that we can find a load outside of an injury to where somebody should be able to do the full movement, like a PVC pipe, 15-pound training bar, even like a galvanized pipe that's 5 pounds or something like that. They should be able to do a sumo deadlift high pull. Whereas hanging from a pull-up bar, there's some people that don't have the grip strength or toes to bar or any of that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Something to think about there.
Pretty much any gymnastics movement, really. Like when we start to think about it, if you just think about the way, you teach your rope climbs or the way you teach your pistols or handstand push-ups, we shouldn't be taking our athletes and being like, all right, if you have handstand push-ups, go ahead and go to the wall and bust out some handstand push-ups. Like it all comes back to the points of performance for the movement and delivering them to our athletes in manners that is most effective, right? We can still think stance, grip, body position. Okay, what's point of performance number 1? Well, that's going to be the first progression that I'm going to focus on, that first point of performance. Cool, we're going to add something in. We're going to add something in. And that's really the long and short of it, is just we're thinking stance, grip, body position. What are the points of performance we need to see in the movement? And what is the best way to just add in a little bit at a time? And then with the gymnastics movements, it might be like, okay, we've reached your capacity for that. You're going to hang out here. That's going to be your scale for the day. And then we're going to continue to add more things for the group as we have a little bit more capacity and experience.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Serena, I love this question that you got, and I think it is still on topic. And so, Tim made mention of telling an athlete what he wants them to do and say, hey, just trust me. I know this is going to work out for you, and that can gain buy-in. As a newer coach, a lot of times we don't have that background knowledge to be confident that what we're asking our athletes to do is going to work. And so you get the fact that it's going to come with time. You're going to build trust as you do this stuff more. But here's my words of advice. I've got a couple of things. Number 1, 2 weeks ago, we discussed knowing the points of performance, and you've got to memorize those things. So as a coach, we've got to set the foundation by having the knowledge base of the movements that we're teaching. We've got to know the points of performance inside and out. So you have to know that stuff. Number 1, that's going to give you confidence. And if I know the points of performance when I'm teaching, I can be very confident in what I'm saying because I know that information. From there, when you are leading a group, you are the leader. I've used the analogy at level 2s where I'm like, hey, you're flying the plane, whether it lands on the runway or it goes into the side of the mountain, you're the one flying it. So you might as well like take hold of the reins and just go for it. With that being said, so if you see somebody that you need to coach, you need to see and correct, go ahead and try it. Be confident in what you're telling them to do, but also be realistic on the outcome of that and call a spade a spade. I can't tell you how many times I've done in the past, and I still do to this day, where I'm like, hey, Kristin, I want you to widen your feet up for me a little bit on this next rep. I have her do it. She does the rep, and I'm like, never mind. Forget I said that. Let's take them back in. That got way worse. Like, if you are confident enough to command your athletes to do something, and you actually objectively observe how they're doing, and you're not afraid to call yourself on your mistake, that's going to gain more trust and get more buy-in. You know what I mean? So that way you can give the cue and correction. You can ask the athlete to do it. When they do it and it's better, you can be like, that looks way better. I know it feels weird because it's new, but this is what I want you to do. Whereas at the same time, you can also be like, hey, I want you to try that. Never mind. It looks way worse. Let's try something else. They're going to realize that you're, not just trying to be in charge to be in charge. You're actually trying to help them. What can you add to that, Kristin?
That is good. I'm answering some questions in the chat about some progression resources since we're coming up to our time. So
if you guys have not gone to CrossFit.com and looked at their online courses, there is a teaching movement course that talks through the difference between layering and progressions, talks through the tell, show, do, check process, gives examples. But then also, by signing up for this course, you get this really cool resource. I forget what it is, but it's something like 100 different progressions that are created, and you'll have access to a document that has all these different progressions. It'll be similar to what Kristin showed before, where it's like 3 or 4 different progressions for a hang power clean. And so if you guys are looking for some resources there, that's a great way to do it. The knowledge has so much content. Not only do you get to see videos of people actually coaching with those progressions. So make sure you guys take care of that, or take advantage of that as well. Jens made mention the coaching fundamentals course is another one on CrossFit.com that has some of that stuff. So make sure you guys are checking that stuff out. With that, we're 2 minutes past, huh?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, that means we got to go. But before I do, we just want to remind you guys that we got a couple big things coming here in 2025 with Best Hour of Their Day. First up is the affiliate tour. It's a 2-day workshop packed with business development, hands-on activities, and education to help you and your affiliate grow. Make sure you can develop your teams. We're teaming up with HSN to make this happen. And so we've got 5 different cities. They're going to be around the country here. So make sure you guys are checking that out and getting signed up when it comes near you. And then the other one is Affiliate Con. I cannot wait for this thing. It's going to be in October. It's going to be in Dallas. This is for affiliate owners, for coaches, for athletes, for anyone and everyone. There's going to be all kinds of speakers, all kinds of resources for business development, coach development, keynote speakers, networking, you name it. It's all going to be there. So make sure you guys can check that out and do that there. Go to besthouroftheirday.com to get on the wait list for both of those, to see the tour dates for the tour, and make that happen. And as always, we will be back here next Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern. If you guys are just getting into this, go back. We've got the videos of all of our previous ones on YouTube, and they are also showing up on your podcast platform. So check that stuff out as well. As always, Kristin, it was a pleasure. No more open announcements, no more open workouts to talk about. Again, let's see, Amanda, where can we sign up? Are you asking about the knowledge? Kristin, can you drop that in the chat? So yeah, there we go.
There it is.
Go right there.
Jens, I would love to come to Germany. I'm going to put it up the chain.
Yeah, let's see what we can do. All right, team. Appreciate you guys. As always, reach out if you need anything, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for checking out this episode of the Best Hour of Their Day podcast. Now, if you're a coach who wants to coach more effectively, impact your members, and advance your career, then the Knowledge Pro is the next step. Inside, you'll get hundreds of coaching videos, weekly calls with level 4 coaches, and direct feedback on your coaching. From homework reviews to full class breakdowns, we do it all. This is the best way to grow as a coach and take your skills to the next level. Now you can join the Knowledge Pro at besthouroftheirday.com/the-knowledge. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. Now keep coaching, keep improving, and we'll see you next time.